And just like that, round 15 is already here. There's only 3 rounds left in the series, and once again the big question is the weather. So this is going to be our race day updates show. If you guys are new here, we go over everything you need to know before the night show, all the injury updates, the weather, the schedule, and even some rider statistics. And of course, if you guys have already been here before, thanks for joining us again. Let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to get into is going to be our injury updates, and unfortunately this week we have a lot to talk about here. So starting off with the 250 class, we saw Chance Hymas go down pretty hard. He high-sided at the end of the rhythm section last weekend and he DNF'd the main event. Thankfully, he looks to be alright because that would be a really unfortunate time to be getting injured, especially as we move towards outdoors, a place that he's already had race wins. Hopefully he can just finish off the season strong, keep the momentum going, and come into outdoors swinging. Next, I'm just going to read off the list of all the other injured riders in the class because there's no new significant updates with them, but I also don't want to just forget about them. So we have Max Anstey, Daxton Bennick, Pierce Brown, Casey Cochran, Levi Kitchen, Cameron McAdoo, Jalik Swall, Carson Mumford, Hardy Munoz, Lorenzo Lacorcio, Gage Linville, and Chad Soltz, all out with their respective injuries that they've had throughout the season. And mind you, this is 12 guys just in the 250 East division that we know of that are completely out of the series due to injury. Now, as far as the 450 class, only one major new development. So first I'm going to go over the riders that we already know about that are injured. Ken Roczen is still pushing through his shoulder and ankle injuries. He definitely looked to be struggling a little bit more last week, so it will be interesting to see how he can do this weekend. Justin Barcia did suffer a pretty bad crash in the whoops last weekend, and he already has that broken finger, so he's definitely going to be banged up, but he will also still be out there tonight. Hunter Lawrence, Jorge Prado, and Eli Tomac are all back on the bike. That's confirmed, and it sounds like Jet Lawrence might even be back on the bike now. But either way, it sounds like he's definitely making a push to be at Paula for the opening round of motocross. So things are definitely looking up for the motocross series at least. That's 4 really heavy hitters that are going to be coming out to rejoin the series. And then of course we have to talk about the big one. Unfortunately, last weekend Jerry Robin ended up going down in the rhythm section. It sounds like he did end up accidentally hitting his rear brake, which ended up causing him to come up a little bit short, and ultimately he ended up going down. And unfortunately his injuries were quite extensive. He suffered a broken C2 vertebrae, a burst fracture at his T5. They immediately did surgery on him that day for a spinal fusion from his T3 all the way down to his T9. He also broke about 6 ribs, and he even punctured his lung. Now, according to Jerry, the surgeon was able to completely straighten his spine in the surgery process, and he was also able to remove some fragments from his spinal cord while in the surgery. There are still some fragments left over though, and as of the time of this recording, Jerry still has no feeling below the injury, so unfortunately, as of right now, it looks like Jerry's going to be a paraplegic. You really hate seeing stuff like this, especially with a crash like this that really didn't look that bad or scary. It's a really harsh reminder that this type of stuff can happen at any moment to pretty much anybody. Thankfully, as much as this is a brutal sport, it's also a great community and a family, and we're already starting to see that. Road to Recovery has definitely jumped into action. They've already raised well over $100,000 for Jerry, and they continue to raise money as we speak. They also have a t-shirt available for $30 if you guys would like to help Jerry out in that way. And then we see things like the Pulp MX LCQ challenge helping Jerry out with partnering with Kyle Chisholm, who is going to ride in Jerry's place in the LCQ and donate all of his winnings back to Jerry. So it's pretty cool to see Pulp MX even allowing that to be done, and it's also really cool to see Kyle putting himself out there for no real benefit other than just to help Jerry out. So it really does suck to see stuff like this happen, but at the same time it is beautiful to see a community rally around somebody like this. If you guys are interested in donating to the Road to Recovery Fund, the link is in the description below. With all that being said, we're going to move on to our 250 class and talk about some of the storylines here. So right now, going into the East Series, there's only 2 rounds left, and this is the last standard round. The next round for them after this will be the finals, which is the East-West Showdown in Salt Lake City. At the top of the standings, by himself for the first time, is going to be Seth Hamaker. The last 2 rounds, he's had the red plate, but he's been tied with both Tom VL and RJ Hampshire, and now for the first time, he is your sole points leader. While literally everybody else on his team has been set back by injuries throughout the year, he's been able to stay healthy and build throughout the season, and it looks like he's probably your best bet to take home this championship. He's definitely going to have his hands full to do that, but he is definitely on the right trajectory to do just that. But anyways, right behind him is RJ Hampshire, and he's only 3 points down, so he can still control his own destiny if he wins this next race. Then no matter what Seth does behind him, all he would have to do is beat Seth at the following round in the showdown, and he would once again be your champion, finishing out his 250 career with both an East and a West Coast divisional championship. It does seem like his wrist is really bothering him though, so that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And then right behind him we have Tom Bial, and he's now 7 points down. So theoretically he could actually win out the series, which probably won't happen because he hasn't won a race yet, but if he did do that, he could still lose the championship to Seth Hamaker, because that would only gain him 6 points if Seth finished in second behind him in both of those races. Now, while neither one of those things seems very likely to happen, it's still a frustrating feeling knowing that you are required to have the riders ahead of you at least make some sort of a mistake or not ride at their best in order to catch them and pass them in the championship at this point. Having said that, this championship on the East Coast has had nothing but mistakes thus far. All three of these riders that we've talked about have left dozens of points on the table so far this season, so he's definitely not out of the championship yet. The fact that he scored 0 points at one of the rounds this year and he's only 7 points back tells you a lot. But it would seem that it's absolutely crucial that he at least beats one of these two guys ahead of him at this round in order to stay in any kind of contention going into the finals. Then in fourth in the championship, we have Colin Park, and he's now 33 points down. But interestingly, after the penalty report last weekend, he was given the 4th place overall. But even without that, he was still going to get 5th. So really solid riding out of Colin Park. This is another top 5 finish for him. This time it was just a straight up top 5. No weather helped him out. He just went out there, rode great, and brought it home. And seeing him right here 4th in the championship doesn't feel too out of place when you consider the season that he's had. Behind him we have Nate Thrasher, who did finish in 4th last weekend, but was docked a position due to gaining time off of the track, so that bumped him back to 5th. Even with that, he's still well within striking distance of retaking that 4th place in the championship. He's only 3 points behind Colin Park, and I do kind of expect him to take that position back from Colin Park. He is riding solid, but he's also having his stereotypical season where he gets a random win in there somewhere, and then he's just kind of all over the board besides that. It's always awesome to have a rider who can go out and get you a win at any time, but it's also super frustrating to have somebody that you know can win that is consistently off the podium. Then 3 points behind Nate Thrasher, we have Chance Hymas, and he's right back here because he DNF'd last weekend. So he's been having a pretty rock solid Supercross season. A couple of weekends ago, he actually looked like he was right in the midst of this title fight, but now after a couple of mistakes and DNFing last weekend, he has fallen pretty significantly far back in the field. Nonetheless, at least he's getting some good Supercross experience. If he's able to finish the season, he will at least have attended all the rounds, and hopefully he will have done so without injuring himself. And honestly, that's all he really needed to do this season. The fact that he was able to get a win, whether it was in the mud or not, is a huge bonus on top of that. So at this point, let's just finish off the season strong and head into motocross. Then there's a pretty significant jump in the points gap back to Max Vohland, but he's right here, and he actually had a really solid finish last weekend with a 6th place finish. I really like to see that. It seems like he's starting to gel with his new finger brake system, and it seems like his confidence in his clutch is going up now that they have that worked out. It seems like he can maneuver his clutch without having to worry about burning it up, so that's obviously helpful. I would not be surprised to see him get another top 5 and maybe contend for a podium tonight. The top 3 definitely have a higher level of speed than him, but you never know if somebody makes a mistake or something like that. The next closest active rider is going to be Henry Miller, and he is 8th in the points by the time you remove Daxton Bennick and Max Anstey, and it would look to me like he's probably going to get to 8th by the time that this championship is over. Really cool to see him doing so well. He's rock solid. He finished 8th last weekend. Pretty underrated rider if you ask me. He doesn't really get talked about much, but he's always right here, right around that top 10 mark. Behind him, we have Austin Faulkner, and it would seem that Austin Faulkner is finally starting to turn a corner. He had some really good speed in qualifying, and he did take home a relatively solid 7th place finish, which might not sound that great, but when you compare that to the rest of his season, it's definitely a step in the right direction. The thing that concerns me is that as his speed is going up, so are his crashes, and that's been the issue throughout his career. And he's not even at a race-winning pace right now, where generally he is at a race-winning pace when he's crashing this much. I don't really care what place he gets, I just don't want to see him get injured again, so hopefully he can get that smoothed out. I would absolutely love to see him get on the podium or even get a win again. That would be fantastic, but more importantly, like I said, I just want him to stay safe out there. And it does seem like he's riding at least a little bit nervous. It's pretty interesting to see him riding with that Alpinestars Tech Air chest protector. It seems like it kind of works and kind of doesn't, so I'm not really sure how I feel about that, but either way, he's giving it a shot. Hopefully, he won't need it tonight. And then I also wanted to give a quick shout out to Devin Simonson. He made his Club MX debut last weekend, and it was his first race back from his injury. And I just gotta say, he definitely far exceeded my expectations. He had a really good start, he rode really well, and he finished well inside the top 10. Even if Chance Hymas did not DNF and finished inside the top 10, he still would have been in the top 10 because he finished in 9th. So that was definitely a very respectable opening result for his Supercross season. It's so hard to jump into a series mid-series and just try to pick up where everybody's already at. And he did exactly that, so shout out to him. And I'm going to be keeping an eye on him tonight as well. Moving on to the 450 class, at the top we obviously have Cooper Webb, and his points lead is now back into the single digits. He's only 9 points up on Chase Sexton, and with 3 rounds remaining, that is exactly the right amount for Chase Sexton to win out. And even if Cooper Webb were to finish in second, they would still tie, giving the championship to Chase Sexton. The interesting part here is that I would argue that the chances of Cooper Webb not finishing in second are pretty low. Even though he did get dominated by Chase Sexton last weekend, he also dominated everybody else. So if somehow Cooper Webb can squeak out a win here, it does seem like he could potentially manage his championship and just kind of cruise in and get second behind Chase at the remaining rounds, which would hand him the title. With that being said, that is a lot easier said than done because Chase Sexton absolutely dominated Cooper Webb last weekend. He definitely talked the talk last weekend and he did not back it up. Chase ended up winning by a very large margin, and that's something we haven't seen very much this year. Usually Cooper Webb is at the very least on his back wheel, and add to that the fact that after this weekend we're heading to 2 relatively hard packed tracks, which is generally what Chase Sexton is stronger at. This could be Cooper Webb's last real chance to try to take this title from Chase Sexton. Then in third, we have Ken Roczen, who is on an island totally by himself in the points at least. He was only able to manage a 7th place finish last weekend, so it definitely seems like that injury is bothering him quite a bit. A 7th place finish is still very respectable, but he's also definitely been the 3rd best guy in general, and that's pretty far off his mark. I would not be surprised to see him bounce back with a top 5 finish today, but as long as he continues to score some solid points through these last few rounds, he will easily take home 3rd in the championship, which is still a respectable finish and probably going to bring him some pretty good bonus money. Next up is going to be Justin Cooper, and I was pretty surprised with Justin Cooper's ride last weekend. I was definitely concerned with the 2 back-to-back whoop sections, which have been his biggest hurdle this season. And given that he's locked in that championship points battle with Malcolm Stewart, I definitely gave the advantage to Malcolm Stewart. And that was my first mistake because Justin Cooper ended up actually beating Malcolm Stewart, where he got 4th and Malcolm got 6th. So he has now leapfrogged back ahead of Malcolm Stewart and is 1 point ahead of him. It's pretty interesting to see these guys going back and forth, 1 point ahead of each other weekend after weekend. I'm not 100% sure what exactly is on the line for 4th in the championship, but nonetheless, it's definitely fun to watch this little battle. And like I was saying, in 5th in the championship is now Malcolm Stewart, and I definitely expected a little bit more out of him with the back-to-back whoop sections. I thought he would probably be inside your top 5. I did pick him for 5th, and unfortunately I was 1 position off with him finishing in 6th. Nonetheless, he still looks pretty good, and if he can finish off the season strong, it will be interesting to see what kind of ride he lands for next season. It sounds like he does want to keep racing, and I'm sure he can find some place somewhere, but where that is exactly remains to be seen. The next closest guy is going to be Aaron Plessinger, and he's been absolutely flying up the point standings. He was well outside the top 10 in the points not that long ago, and now he's knocking on the door to be in the top 5. If these 2 guys we just talked about are not careful, he's going to pass one or both of them by the end of the season. He has been on a very consistent streak of podiums, only being off the podium a couple of times in the last few races, and he looks like a completely different rider than what we saw at the start of the season. So that's really awesome to see. He has renewed with KTM, so that pressure is off his back. He's just going out there and riding really great. The next guy closest to Aaron Plessinger is going to be Justin Barcia, and they were actually having a really good battle last weekend. That is until Justin Barcia went for a roly tumble in the whoop section, so that was definitely not ideal. He was already injured, and it was pretty cool to see him fighting Aaron Plessinger for that podium spot. It looked like he was going to be able to put up a legit fight. Now, unfortunately, that did not happen, but like I said in the injury updates, he will be racing tonight, so maybe he can redeem himself tonight. And then in 8th in the championship, we have Justin Hill. So he managed another top 10 finish last weekend, and while he did lose to a few of the guys that are behind him in the points, he's still riding rock solid. I know he wants that top 5, so maybe he can hunt that down. But right now, he does look like he's just a tick off when compared to everybody else that we've talked about so far. Nonetheless, it's awesome to see him get through this much of the season. Hopefully he can finish it off strong and score points at every round, and hopefully he can come out and have some good results in the SMX playoffs. Behind him, we have somebody who I'm pretty interested in right now. Dylan Ferrandis came flying up through the field last weekend. I think it went a little bit under the radar, but he was actually outside of the top 10, and he worked his way all the way up to 5th. He passed some really good guys even to get up there in the first place, and I was honestly pretty shocked. We've seen Dylan get top 5s in this class before, but nothing quite like that. So I'm really curious to see what he can do. It sounds like he's really enjoying that factory transmission from HRC. Maybe he can use that to get off to a good start today and do something really cool like get on the podium. Rounding out our top 10 in the championship, we have Shane McElrath. And while it feels like he maybe shouldn't be in the top 10 in the championship, when you look at his numbers, he actually definitely deserves to be here. He still finished well inside the top 10 last weekend, and he also beat both Dean Wilson and Joey Savacci, who are both also on Hondas, and they're both technically supposed to be better than him. Savacci is the A rider for the Quadlock Honda team that Shane McElrath is on, and I can honestly say that because of the fact that Shane McElrath was only offered a part-time deal at the start of the season. And of course, Dean Wilson was brought in to ride for HRC Honda, so the fact that he's on a full factory bike, you would think that theoretically he should be better than Shane McElrath as well. So it's awesome to see him doing so well for himself, and he looks way better than he did on that Suzuki. So he's making the most of the Honda ride, love to see it. And then behind him, we have Mitchell Oldenburg, who didn't do so hot last weekend. He did bring home a 15th, but he still did significantly better than his teammate Benny Bloss, who he has been absolutely locked in a points battle with. It seemed like Benny Bloss was actually taking the upper hand on him, and if Benny hadn't made that mistake and gone a lap down and done all that last weekend, maybe he would still have the upper hand. But anyways, right now, Mitchell Oldenburg is the next closest guy to the top 10 right here in 11th. But closing in fast right behind him is Joey Savacci, who is bouncing back strong after missing a round and then also not qualifying for a main event at the following round. He finished just outside the top 10 last weekend, and even though that's not a great finish for Joey Savacci, he still closed in points and leapfrogged ahead of Benny Bloss, and now he's closed in right behind Mitchell Oldenburg. And like I said, right behind him is now Benny Bloss, who was really on a hot streak there. He was consistently inside the top 10 for multiple weeks in a row, but unfortunately, he barely scored any points at the last round. I think he went down. I didn't get the full story on that, but I'm sure he'll be bouncing back strong this week. And then we also got to talk about Colt Nichols, who did relatively okay last weekend, but he can't even seem to beat the guys that are on beta, and neither Oldenburg nor Bloss had great success in the 250 division like Colt Nichols did. So I have to wonder if maybe he should have stayed with Team Beta, but nonetheless, he's doing okay. He's cashing a paycheck, so good to see him right here. And then I just want to quickly mention Christian Craig. He did finish 12th last weekend, so he's working his way up towards that top 10. Hopefully, he can get a top 10 before the season is over. We know the skill is there. The confidence is definitely a different question, but the equipment is good and the skill is there, so I would love to see that. And the last rider we're going to talk about is going to be Dean Wilson, who, like I said earlier, already grabbed a top 10 finish. So great for him. Love to see that. Seems like he's already up to speed. I don't expect him to finish much better than he did last weekend, but even with that, he's pretty much already done his job. He's got a good finish. He's out there putting the bike on the track, getting some camera time, And honestly, it looks like he's just having a great time. So it's really cool to see. And I'm just happy that he's able to get this opportunity. Next, let's talk about the schedule. So a little bit of an interesting schedule. Free practice is going to start around 11:30, which is around the time that, as of the time of recording this, rain should be letting up if we get any. Looks to be pretty light, so hopefully it's not too bad. Now, as far as race day live, that's going to kick off at 1:30 Eastern, and the night show itself is going to kick off at 6:30 Eastern. One other thing worth noting on the schedule is that the SMX next main event will be right after the final 450 heat race. And as far as the weather, like I had briefly mentioned, it does look like it's supposed to rain through the night and potentially rain a little bit early on in the day. But if so, it looks like it's going to be some light precipitation. So I do expect the track to be relatively rideable. I don't think we're going to see a full mud race, if anything. But from what I've seen of the dirt so far, even before any rain came down, it looked pretty spongy. So I definitely expect this track to break down. And we're not really sure exactly what to expect from this dirt because we haven't raced here in many years, so this is new dirt for us. And now let's move on to our rider statistics. So first we're going to talk about Chase Sexton. Looking at Chase, he has to win. Last weekend he won by 14.6 seconds, so one of the largest margins of the season. He now has more wins than Cooper Webb this season, and in order for him to guarantee himself this championship, he has no choice but to win every single race left in the series. So if you guys are playing fantasy, he's definitely a solid pick. Also, if you guys are betting, he does have slightly better odds than Cooper Webb for winning tonight, so he could definitely be worth putting a wager on that if that's your thing. And as far as Cooper Webb, he might not have been that close to Chase Sexton last weekend, but he has been rock solid and he has been right on his back wheel before. We've seen him have the speed. He's been on the podium 11 out of the 14 rounds thus far, and he has proven time and time again that he will always consistently put himself right in the fight for that win. So if you guys are just counting him out for the win tonight, you're kind of crazy. If you want to take a little bit more of a long shot, you could put him down for the win. It's really not that crazy. Looking at the style of track that we're racing on tonight, this could be the last round that really suits his riding style when compared to Chase. So I think he's going to definitely come out swinging, knowing how important this race could be. Now, as far as Ken Roczen, he did finish 7th last weekend, but he also has 7 podiums this season, even with his injuries. So you cannot count him out to get another podium tonight. He wouldn't be my first pick to finish on the podium, but he's definitely worth considering. I do expect the track to be a little bit slower speed tonight than what we saw last weekend, so I would not be surprised to see him at least get a top 5 finish. Now, as far as Aaron Plessinger, he's absolutely trending up in the right direction. Since the Daytona round when he got his first podium, he's only been outside of the top 5 one time, and that's when he got tangled up in the first turn in Philadelphia, and he still came back to an 8th place finish. His average finish since that Daytona round is 3.74, and 5 of those were podiums. In my opinion, he's as much of a lock as you're going to get for the 3rd spot on the podium. He's definitely a good fit, and he's who I would put in 3rd place. The 5th rider we're going to talk about is going to be Justin Cooper, and he worked his way into a solid 4th place finish last week. And in my opinion, I think the track is going to suit his riding style even more this weekend, so he could definitely be a podium threat as well. We've seen him get good starts before. And to be honest with you guys, I do believe he can win a race if he gets the whole shot and the whoops work to his advantage. I really don't think you can count him out for a race win. Not saying to put him down for the win tonight, but I am just saying I think it's within the realm of possibilities. So he's another guy to consider putting in your top 3 and definitely should probably be in your top 5. Now, another guy you might want to consider for your top 5 is going to be Malcolm Stewart, but before you do that, I would just like to tell you that he's only been inside the top 5 once in the last 4 rounds, and in those 4 rounds, his average finish is actually a 7.5. So not looking really great for Malcolm. He did get 6th last weekend, so he was right there. But with that being said, I thought the track would kind of work to his advantage last weekend, and he still finished in 6th. Looking at Dylan Ferrandis, I'm actually more interested in him potentially being in the top 5 this weekend, as he worked his way up from well outside of the top 10 last weekend and managed to bring home a top 5 finish. So he actually passed Malcolm. I do think there's something interesting going on there. Definitely worth at least considering or looking at him as well. Now, if you guys are playing Rocky Mountain Fantasy, the wild card this week is 13th place. And I don't think that we need to make this too complicated. Looking at the results from last weekend, Colt Nichols brought home that 13th place finish. But one thing you want to consider is that Justin Barcia did go down and finish behind all of those guys. So if you bump him up, that moves everybody down one spot, and that would put Christian Craig finishing in 13th place. Now, nothing against Christian Craig, but I do really like him for 13th place this week. Looking at his 5 starts and finishes so far this year, his average finish is 14.2, and he has a best finish of 12th, which he's done twice thus far. So he's already finishing generally right around this area. And for him to really move up a spot, he's going to have to start beating names like Savachi, McElrath, guys that he definitely can beat, but so far hasn't shown any real sign that he would beat them. And to go down further, now he's getting beat by guys like Harrison, Bloss, and Oldenburg. Definitely guys that could technically beat him, but probably shouldn't be beating him. So 13th just kind of makes sense for him right now. But there are, like I said, other guys in this area that could definitely fall into that same position. Mitchell Oldenburg, Benny Bloss, maybe even Shane McElrath has a bad weekend. Stuff like that could definitely happen. So whatever your gut tells you, I would go with that. But statistically, Christian Craig looks like the right fit. If you guys made it this far in the video, let me know down in the comments below, who are your picks for tonight, especially for that tricky 13th place wild card. And I also just want to say thank you for sticking around for the entirety of the video. That also really means a lot to me. If you guys haven't already, make sure you subscribe. I'm going to be trying to hit some of the nationals this year and bring you firsthand coverage of that. I will definitely be at Paula, so that should be pretty cool. But anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.